Objects are predefined packages of fields relating to a particular function in the system. If you wish to create your own custom object with a bespoke set of data, you'll first need to figure out where that data exists in the database table or tables and create a SQL statement to select that data. There are different ways to find data in Unit 4 ERP, but when it comes to database tables, I like to start off with a data dictionary. This is the list of modules, tables, and columns that I have seen presented in a number of formats, such as the Excel file shown here, and also as an RARX file, which I will link in the description. In the data dictionary, I will start in the DS module, as that represents documents. And I can see that amongst the tables there is one called ADS document, which is a list of the documents stored in the system. Expanding the columns will show me all the column names and their descriptions. And from these, the columns we need are the document type, so we can specify incoming invoice documents, and the document globally unique identifier, also the title or the description, which gives us the document name. Returning to the list, we can also see that there is an ADS index table, which gives us the indexing data that goes with the document. This needs a little more explanation. Returning to the system, we can see the index information set up against the incoming invoice document type using the document type screen. 7 indexes have been set up, and each one has a description and a data type, amongst other things. If we look back at the data dictionary and expand the ADS index table columns, we can see lots of document index column names that are actually 20 different index numbers listed with 5 columns for each index number. There is also the document ID and document type, which corresponds to the same columns in the ADS document table. Let's have a closer look at the index information to see what columns of data we actually need. We are only using the first 7 indexes, and you can see by this reduced list of columns in the data dictionary that for each index number there is a date, decimal, integer, index, and index ID column. So we need to work out which of the 5 is needed for each of our 7 indexes. In the report engine, I have entered a simple SQL query asking for the document identifier and the document type, and then the 5 index types for each of the 7 indexes we are using, 1 to 7. I've also put in a filter to only show results where the document type is IIN, or incoming invoices, and the document library is like MN, because on this environment there are a few different document libraries. The results show the 2 documents that are currently sitting in documents for registration. Our first index is actually the client, and so you can see that the index 1 column has the client code MN, and the index 1 ID column has the client attribute code A3. We don't need to see any client information, and therefore we don't need any of the columns for index 1. I will remove it from the SQL selection, and now let's have a look at index 2. Index 2 from our document type is the transaction number. We have 2 main filters that we need for our documents for registration report. First, the document type needs to be related to the incoming invoices, and second, there can be no transaction number because that would mean that the invoice had already been used. This means that our final SQL statement needs to indicate that the transaction number should be 0. We can see that the doc.ind2int column has a 0 figure. This looks like the only index 2 column that we will need to include, but we will do a test shortly to make sure it behaves as we need it to. I will carry on making adjustments in this way to choose the most appropriate column for each of the remaining indexes so we can see the data we need. Here we have the final result where we have our transaction number as a 0, our supplier number, invoice date, our amount as a decimal, the PO number as an integer, and finally our comments. Just to prove that the transaction number will behave as we need it to, I've registered one of the 2 invoices, and here we have the transaction number. If I go back and refresh the data, we can see that the transaction number is visible. Therefore, if I add a filter to the SQL statement so that we are only showing results with a 0 in that column, that will give us the data that we need. It's important to note that a document type can have a list of indexes of any description and of any data type and in any order. So if you are using multiple document types, you will need to ensure that the index information is set up in the same way for both. Let's have a quick look at the ADS document table to ensure we can see those three columns that we need: the document type, document ID, and description. Now that we know all of the data that we need to include as fields in our new object, we can create a SQL statement that brings those two tables together. The statement shown below selects the description from the ADS document table and the various index information from the ADS index table. It joins them together based on them having the same document ID, and it filters them to only show incoming invoice documents with a transaction number of 0 and that exist in the MN document library. If we run that SQL command, we can see that we get the data we need for our object. We will copy that SQL command, as the next step is to create a new database table that has just the data we require.